Thank you guys. The last session of the afternoon. So we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of food. You're going to hear from some really great people that are making an impact. I just happen to sell some ads to local advertisers, so not really making that big of an impact. But we're going to talk about some really not yet. But I do like to eat food, and we're fortunate enough to eat food. And I think what we're going to talk a little bit about too is what Tony Robbins just talked about, which is unfortunately there still is a pretty big gap in terms of food out there. So we'll jump right in. I'm going to start with introductions. So start with Ed Martin, Senior Advisor of Vision Private Equity, co-founder of 100billionmeals.org. Thank you, Ed. Darryl, DMC McDaniels, hip-hop icon and philanthropist and author. Carl Zuanelli, CEO of Nuovo Pasta, the Active International Pasta Association. And I didn't get your name, Lynne, earlier. Lynne, Homrich. And I can't see that on here, and I'm sorry I didn't write this down earlier, but Chief Changemaker. So I apologize, I didn't have it on my list because I didn't prepare. But we will get started. So let's just start with each one of you. What inspired you to get involved with philanthropy around food? We'll start with Carl. I think it's probably an obvious one for Carl, but we'll start with Carl.
Yeah, well, food itself is something that's near to all of us, right? We listening to Wendy a little bit earlier, and something we all consume. To me, when you're making food and you're sharing it with somebody, you're sharing part of yourself with them, right? It's almost like a singer or a performer. They're ingesting what you're making. And to me, pasta, I grew up, I think the first thing I ever ate or solid food was pasta. Pastina, in the Italian household that I ate it was called. And it represented love. And what better way to give in this world than to give love? And if love is represented in food, and it is to me, then what better way and what better food to give than pasta, which represents love. Pasta is one of the most globally beloved foods in the world. During the pandemic and that global crisis that we had, people pivoted and they turned to pasta and they cleared out shelves, not only in the United States, but all around the country, because they turned to something they loved, and pasta. And that really was the foundation of what began my thought about how do I give now. And someone said to me, and I hate to take too much time here, but you can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. And again, so I'm all in on giving.
Thank you. Before we move on, a quick question about pastina. I heard a rumor that it's coming back to the shelves.
I hope it's going to come back to the shelves. It's a very difficult thing to make. During the pandemic, it was one of the most difficult items to make because it's a very tiny little pasta. That's why it's called pastina, teeny weeny pasta. But it's making a comeback, and it's still being made in Italy, and we're doing a great job importing it into the States.
That's good. Good to know. Darryl, same question to you. What really inspired you to get into this?
I kind of fell into the food thing because the stars are aligned perfectly for all of us, regardless of what your situation is. But with the food thing, a year ago, I started a cookie company. And it's called DMC, which stands for Darryl Makes Cookies. But the reason why I did it is I wanted to do something to put some adrenaline in the mental health conversation. I'm here for the mental health conversation part. And I didn't know that I had the power or the ability to be part of change. A brand is a blessing. And with a blessing comes responsibility. So for me, I was an alcoholic, suicidal, metaphysical, spiritual wreck who was thinking of killing himself. At the age of 35, I found out that I was adopted. Jam Master Jay got shot and murdered, and then my father died. So I was like this. But with the cookies, there was so much division and sadness and depression in the world. And since I've been sober for 20 years, I was like, what could I do to bring people together? Something that I've been doing with my music for over 41 years. Something that will inspire, motivate, educate, and entertain people at the same time. So I was like, I'm gonna do cookies. I'm gonna make cookies, and I'm gonna call it Darryl Makes Cookies. So for me, food, and you said it, food, builders, creators, artists, bakers, cooks, chefs, it's all the same thing. We all doing the same thing. And as you notice from this conference today, everybody has a connection to the same thing. So for me, what inspires me is the things that inspired us to create hip hop. Have a conversation about the situation. Because there's so many situations, whether it's homelessness, foster care, adoption, illiteracy, jails, homelessness, it's all the same people in the same areas. So my idea is have a conversation about the situation. And when you have a conversation about the situation, that brings people to collaboration. And then it's participation. With conversation about the situation and the collaboration, it brings about elevation and transformation. So I represent from a brand standpoint, not knowing that I was put on this earth to do this, everything that Run DMC did when we collaborated with Aerosmith, it solved the problem. It knocked down the walls that were separating us from solving something, brought hip hop and rock and roll together, brought white people and black people together, changed the way that we relate to each other. And then the other one that made me just fall into it, I didn't know that, is what we did with Adidas. Adidas was just an athletic sneaker, but we took it and brought it into fashion, but we made it a universal thing where when you see Adidas now, because of Run DMC did by collaborating with Adidas, you see integrity, you see something that's positive. So I'm a representation of the power that these brands have to change all the situations, because everybody up here is creative. I'm hearing all the talk about AI, and everybody's working with a purpose. And the purpose has one destiny: to stop everything that's been going on for millions and millions of years. We have that power. So I'm just representing here today the power that brands have, but nothing gets solved unless we cooperate and collaborate. Then, while we're fixing homelessness, we can fix foster care situations. We can fix the educational situations. So I just want to say that your brand is a blessing, but with a blessing becomes responsibility. And I was in the comic books as a little kid. Stan Lee said it best: your brand is a power. Everybody has a superpower, whether you know it or not. Now, you was given that superpower for a specific reason. So everything I've been hearing here today is people utilizing and taking the responsibility to take their positions and their power to transform what needs to be transformed. And the beautiful thing about it, it all starts with conversation. We're having conversations about these issues. So that's a lot, but I'm just saying that was the purpose of hip hop, for the young people to have a conversation. If you listen to the message, that was a mental health record. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me, don't push me. So what was happening 40 years ago, 50 years, 60 years ago, some of those things have gotten better. But with your brand, you are in a position to use that power to eradicate that issue, so we could all come back and have another conference like this to solve the other issues that we can.
Thank you. Ed, can you talk a little bit about how it's a tough act to follow, by the way. But
amen to what Darryl said.
Everybody's doing it.
I can
Still
sit
has
and
the
listen
day
to
job
you all,
with the
all day.
rhymes.
Well, I'll just say, goodness, today has been just, I'll use the word blessing has come up. I use it often, and I just feel very, very blessed to be in a room with people who are leaning in to co-create something to help lift people. And so it's a gift to me, and every person I've heard today, I want to help that one, and I want to help. I know there's 100 billion meals, but and 100 billion meals on the hunger side, hunger and food security, but it ties into the mental health stuff we'll talk about with Darryl and with Lynne. And I will say, in some ways too, I mean, the other piece of it for me is I got involved with this back in the early 90s when I was at the Kellogg Company, and people asked me for money all the time. And I worked in marketing. I didn't have the giving away money. I had the marketing money. So I had to figure out how to take my marketing money to solve a business issue so I could basically move the money to girls' education, to poverty, health, education. So I took it with me to Kellogg's, and then Coca-Cola, then Citigroup, then Ford Motor Company, then the Hershey Company. And as the years went, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just recognized that all of it, as you're saying, Darryl, is all interconnected. If I'm thinking of foster care, I'm also thinking of hunger. I'm thinking on shelter. I'm thinking it's all interconnected. And so even the group here today, if we take just the people here today, we could co-create things with the ingredients that we all have in this room that are radically amplifying our individual one. So for me, I've been involved in this stuff for 35 years, and it'll be my exit strategy is to drop dead doing this. That's what I love doing. So I'm grateful to be here, and I know as we talk about the hunger and the food security side, the last piece of it will be Darryl and will be Lynne talking about the mental health side of it. And Lynne and I know each other for many years as well, and we got reconnected just based on our journey with our children, having very severe mental illness, having significant health-related issues, and dealing with those kinds of things. And so we got reconnected that way. So she'll share a little bit more on that side.
So on that note, Lynne, I just think about myself, right? When you're hungry, it affects the way you think, the way you act. Like I said earlier, I'm fortunate to be able to eat pretty much what I want to eat. If you're not, can you talk a little bit about that connection between wellness and the lack of food, or the lack of wellness that comes from the lack of food, and just how you think about helping solve that?
Sure. So I'll answer that from the context of I'm the mom of 4. I think that one of my singular objectives as a mom was to make sure that my kids were well fed before they headed out the door to school every day. I was big on, sorry for the Kellogg's thing, Ed, but I was big on non-sugary breakfasts.
Fair enough.
That is not the case for so many children in our country. And to your point, when a child is hungry, they can't think. If they can't think, they can't learn. If they can't learn, they're not going to reach their full potential. So I represent, I call myself a chief mental health changemaker. That's a separate story that maybe we'll have time for someday. But I do know mental health, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy, mental health is at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, but you can't even have mental health if you're hungry. So we have a big food insecurity problem in this country that so many people don't even know about. And to your point, somebody said earlier, I think it was on the last panel, brands can move the world. And so with your reach and your influence, you can help to get the message out there and make change.
I just want to add, if you listen to my records, and you're 100% right, most of my records is
my
talk.
kids all listen to
Yeah.
it. Yeah, when they knew I was going to be on a panel with him, they're like, now they think I'm cool.
Most of my records was me talking about family. And one of the big things of Christmas time in Hollis, Queens, mom's cooking chicken and collard greens, rice and stuff and macaroni and cheese. And I'm DMC in a place to be. I go to St. John's. I love eating chicken and collard greens. The food insecurity leads to a lot of social issues. Because when I was growing up, I had the best mother and father ever, even though I didn't find out I was adopted till I was 35. But I had the best mother and father ever. Growing up in Hollis, Queens, New York, it was the lowest suburban middle class area of Queens. Now, the kids that had meals, they were cool. You know what I'm saying? They could function. The kids that didn't have meals, they would steal for the meal. See how that's connected? They would steal for the meal. And none of these kids was bad. They just wanted to eat. And by not having an education, they didn't know about going that route. So all they knew was the quick and easy way to do it. I'm going to steal money, or I'm going to steal whatever, cars, jewelry, I'm going to rob houses. And the crazy thing is 99.9% of the time, when you look at the first thing most of the people did when they got money, even when they sold drugs, the drug dealers, the first thing they would do is take you out to eat. Because they didn't have that. That was a lack in their life. So that's what I'm saying. Purpose and destiny with these brands that make all the stuff that people need to eat, wear. You know, we realize with hip hop, we teach people what to wear, how to talk, what to drive. You hear hip hop, we brag about everything. They brag about the bands, the Gucci and Louis and stuff like that. We busy dropping brands, but we ain't teaching people how to live and survive. With those branded powers, we can teach that. One of the organizations I work with is Harry Chapin's organization out in Long Island with the food bank and stuff like that. And I went there and the statistics was real crazy. But see, education and food insecurity goes hand in hand. One of the things that Harry said, I don't want to just give the people food. I want to teach them how to create and grow their own. So if they can't grow it, let's teach them the ingredients to bake it. How do you make pasta? So all of this is so interconnected because it's all about creation and creativity. And from generation to generation, like I tell kids the same thing that was going on in the 50s is going on now. I got teased, bullied, and picked on when I was a kid, but that didn't stop me from achieving my goals. We knew the difference between right or wrong, but the good thing is we had people that would nourish us, but it's not just about the food you eat. Food is not just something to consume into your body. Y'all know the saying, food for thought. Food for thought helps us beat and defeat whatever it is that we're going up against.
Can I make a point on that thought and food for thought? You know, not just food insecurity is what food's all about and trying to solve that problem, but it also breaks down barriers because food has no borders. And you gave a shout out to mac and cheese, which I'm thankful for.
Yes.
And you know, mac and cheese goes back to you know, the founding fathers. Yankee Doodle went to town, right? Stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni way back when. So, but food breaks down borders. And it's not just about pasta, it's about any food, right? One of the most popular restaurant chains right now up and coming is called Caba, Mediterranean, right? A friend of mine who's a big investor in that, Lebanese fellow. And right now, there's a lot of turmoil in the Middle East. There always has been as long as we can remember, right? And sometimes we're fearful about folks that are in the Middle East. They're terrorists. But then we sit down and we'll eat that food with the people that have prepared it from that region. And it breaks down the borders, it breaks down the fears, it breaks down the anxieties. And that transcends Middle Eastern food, Jamaican food, right? When you understand, and Italians and Jamaicans, believe it or not, have so much in common in the food that they eat. And I found that out by sitting next to a short little Jamaican grandma who was flying back to Jamaica, and I'm flying down to Florida to sell pasta. And we start talking about food, and they eat salt codfish. That's big in Italian families, bacala. And they eat goat meat, and I was raised eating goat meat as a kid. And you understand that when people would look at the two of us that were seated next to each other, they said they have nothing in common. Right. By the end of that trip, we had everything in common. And we had a joyful conversation. So food breaks down barriers. It destroys borders. And it eliminates fears. And it solves hunger.
So you just answered a question I was going to ask, which was really around storytelling, and that's a great way to sort of articulate the connection between people and food. I'll actually go to Ed on this one, given your experience with a lot of the brands you rattled off. From a storytelling perspective, if you're not a food-forward brand, how do you tell a story that maybe can connect other brands to the hunger challenges that the world faces?
Yeah, it's a great question too. Food is one of those. There's a lot of issues out there these days that are slightly more challenging to broach, but food is undergirding. I've never really run into anybody that's had a major issue in terms of dealing with hunger and food security, and I think part of it as well for me, and it reminds me of when Darryl and his team were kind enough to come out to Aspen along with Makita and Kenny and my partner Mark Sadovnik, who's very deeply involved in it, and we were working on the top of a mountain in Aspen, and you guys gondola it all the way up. It was just a very eclectic, going back to breaking down barriers, but it allowed people to come into a room who would never be in the same room, And it was such this beautiful, eclectic mix with a central purpose all around what's called RUTF, ready-to-use therapeutic foods. And we were getting that out for UNICEF at the time, and that's right on death's door. If you're a starving child, there's something called RUTF, which is you deliver that. It's a medical miracle. And so Darryl and his team came out, and we had so many different groups. And again, hunger in the food side, you don't have to be necessarily a food brand, but it's something that's a low risk for brands. So sometimes brands get a little concerned. They're like, I don't know, I'm going to weigh into this one or that one. But on the hunger and the food security side, it's a very, very low risk way where it has a universal ability to pull people together. And so that was one example I'll always keep with me when you were performing there on top of this mountain at night. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? But it creates the story around anybody connected to that. They'll share forever. They'll share forever, and they'll take that, and they'll talk about the brands that were involved. They'll talk about the people who were there. And that third-party amplification, when you share about somebody else, that's a very, very, very different thing. When I was at the Hershey Company, we had a group, I don't know if you've heard of this story or not, but we had the founder put all his money to help orphans, right? So we had Milton Hershey School, and it's a multiple billion-dollar trust at that point. But when you start sharing about yourself, they were very shy to share about themselves because Midwest, they're like, I'm not going to brag about myself. And we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of the school. And we were really torn. We were trying to figure out, like, how we're going to, because the school's free. It's like $80,000, $90,000 per student, but it's free. Only qualification, you got to be poor. But how do we tell people? And so we went two routes. We went one route, the Oscars. And we had the amazing Queen Latifah. We had a number of other people involved with it. And I also called Vivian. And people were like, who's Vivian? I'm like, well, Vivian works with a couple thousand African-American churches with the spouse looking at health and well-being in the African-American community. They became a beacon. So my marketing dollars, going back to the good exchange kind of dynamic, my marketing dollars went immediately into health and well-being in that particular community so that particular community could understand the opportunity at the Milton Hershey School. So it's these beautiful omni-win, co-creative kind of opportunities. And you've heard it all day from people. It's been a remarkable day because that's been the theme all day long, is those kinds of co-creations.
Thank you. So Darryl, on the storytelling note from a music perspective, I think we hear a lot of different artists sort of telling stories through different types of music. Is there anything specific that you, thinking from a brand's perspective, food-related, non-food-related, that you think would be, how can brands tell similar stories authentically with music?
Just basically, basically everyday life situations. Because look, at the end of the day, if it's dreadlocks, curls, or braids, it's still hair. If it's white skin or light skin or black skin, it's still skin. No hate. If it's Adidas or Nike, we ain't got no beef. It's still sneakers. So a perfect example is in just telling a story without trying to bring people in. One perfect example is it's going to be Christmas very soon. I can't go to the mall on Christmas. Not because I can't, because everybody, every race, creed, religion, and color screams my Christmas and Holics lyrics at me. The Jewish people, it's Christmas time, me and my Jewish people, Muslim people, shooting a rhyme at me. But what is that significance? The story is this. It's chicken and collard greens, but what does every culture do on a festive occasion? Sit down and eat. See, that's the one thing that you could do. And another one to show you the power of storytelling is, when I was coming into hip-hop, and, you know, at the time, hip-hop was considered, black ghetto music. Because if you go back and do your homework in the 70s and early 80s, every record was a message record. Talking, conversation about the situations, unemployment, this and that, boom, bang. So I'm coming into hip-hop as something that I want to do. How do I relate to all these people in here? How do I fit in with this? So with the same attitude to make them understand, I'm just like you, but I just did something different. While you were out gangbanging and selling drugs, I came with my story about who I am. Give me the mic. I'm Darryl McDaniels, 18 years old, out of Hollis, Queens, New York. There's death, darkness, and destruction all around me. You know what I'm saying? I found out that Hollis, Queens was a hub for foster kids. And I was like, my mother and father, you could have told me that. I was one of them. But I come out and my story was, I'm DMC, in the place to be. I go to St. John's University. Since kindergarten, I acquired the knowledge. After 12th grade, I went straight to college. Now, I'm saying this in a room of people that didn't think education was cool. But I said it with the same attitude and the same enthusiasm and proudness about myself that now my story made them go, you mean you can still go to school and be cool? So what happened? Me telling my story or that story initiated change. And I was speaking to somebody from Africa. The reason why they say they don't let their stories get diluted and polluted and destroyed once it is commercialized, because here's another thing. Anything that is sacred and holy to a nation or a community of people will get diluted, polluted, destroyed once it's commercialized. But it's up to the people who experience that situation or that culture to keep the real stories alive. My story about Christmas in Hollis, even if you don't care about Santa Claus and Jesus' birth, you can relate to it. My story about I'm DMC and the place to be, I go to St. John's University, that wasn't just me, like you said, everything's co-connected. That wasn't me just promoting education. That was me promoting a solution to poverty. Because all the issues that we're talking about are poverty, and the mental health poverty issues never get to shine because why? We got stigma. And the stigma only exists because people are afraid to talk about it. So to you brands, if people are afraid to talk about the issues, find storytellers and artists to create a movie, a film, a song, a dance, a sculpture, a painting, or something about it. And in the blink of an eye, you have attacked the problem on the front line. So storytelling is key for the brands, even for Run DMC. And I'll show you where it goes wrong. In 1990, Run DMC did an album called Back from Hell. And Jam Master Jay, rest in peace, was our producer, and the record labels and stuff like that. They're trying to keep up with trends. They want to keep making money. But here's where storytelling and branding can go wrong. When a brand does something outside of its true characteristics. Now, on this record, Back from Hell, it was typical Run D and J. But we took off the Adidas, put on the clothes everybody else had, and then we started, we cursed a little bit too much. So people know DMC for, you can call me Darryl, you can call me D, you can call me Darryl Mack, or you can call me DMC. People always ask me, what does my name mean? D's for Never Dirty, MC for Mr. Clean. I didn't curse on the records. But to be down with the current situation, I changed my story. And then when I went back with my original story in a changing environment, it had a bigger impact. Why? Because nobody was telling that story. So it's the brand's responsibility, like Coca-Cola and Dove and everything, they've been around forever. Do not only change with the times, but tell a story from a foster kid now is the same story as my foster kid story from 1964. So storytelling, find authentic creators and storytellers, because every generation, the only thing that changes from generation to generation is this technology. We got AI now, but the stories are the same. Somebody was hungry with a mental health issue 50 years ago. Somebody's hungry with a mental health issue today.
So the storytelling, I loved everything you just said too about especially finding the authenticity. You pulled out the mobile phone, right? I just called it a mobile phone.
Technology.
That's how old I am. So the platforms, there's telling a story is one part. Finding the platform to put that story on, which obviously every platform has different lengths now, different formats. Lynne, can you talk a little bit about how you would advise a brand on articulating, and mental health is a challenging thing to tell stories around broadly. Like when you think about different platforms, is there any recommendation or thought in terms of short form, long form? Does it matter?
Well, I think we've talked about all day People have said you have to find something that you're passionate about. If you are passionate about the mental health cause, you will find some direct connection between your brand and some organization that's already in existence. So we've seen today up here multiple times, Big Brothers Big Sisters. If you go out and look at the work they're doing, they are touching so many people, not just the littles, they're touching the bigs on mental health issues. They're doing incredible work around mental health first aid education, teaching adults to recognize the signs when a child may be struggling, and that adult can apply that knowledge that he or she has gained through Big Brothers Big Sisters to their little, but also to their own family. So I was also going to mention that we're going through a huge loneliness epidemic right now as well. One of the fastest ways to eradicate loneliness is to sit down and share a meal with someone. So there's some terrific programs out there at the school level, particularly middle school and high school level. And there's a number of one's called Let's Have Lunch. Your brand could fund the Let's Have Lunch programs, because what it does is it chooses a leader who then organizes kids to go and find the kids who are sitting by themselves having lunch, and they say, come and join us. Let's have lunch together. And so again, back to this, food is the basis of solving so many problems, mental health included.
Go ahead, girl.
First, it's just amazing to be part of this panel, and sitting next to Darryl, who is a storyteller extraordinaire, right? This is a man who's the modern
Plus,
day.
he makes you want to dance.
He makes you want to dance while he's telling you.
It's going, and you just want to dance.
And the stories that were told in ancient times and were written down, by Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Darryl's telling the same journey, just in modern parlance. And he's a poet, and it's amazing to be sitting next to him. One of the things Lynne just said about passion, if you're passionate about something, one thing I think that we should not forget, if we're passionate about our product and our desire is to build a brand with that product, first of all, don't be embarrassed about the desire and thinking it's a little bit selfish. I've got this desire. Desires are not bad.
That's a beautiful thing.
Desires, and our friend the CJ mentioned the G word before, called God, which some people call the source or the universal spirit. That universal spirit wants that desire to come through you so it can create its desire about feeding people, its desire about bringing people together and solving loneliness, right? Its desire about creating a company where hundreds of people have health insurance or 401ks or are able to buy cars. That wasn't anybody's desire when they first started the company. They just wanted to get that product out there. But what comes from that is amazing. So don't be embarrassed about your passion, and the cause will be attracted to you like a magnet that you'll be able to contribute to.
And real quickly, I forgot I was on the road and somebody told me passion is the root word for suffering. So you will die for this purpose. You will die. Like some people, I'm doing everything for my brand. You got to realize you're doing something because there's a desire for you to do it. But that power is showing you why you should share it. Because if you're able to accomplish that, people don't realize that, all of these people, the people that don't have education, the people that don't have food, the people don't have a place to live, their situation doesn't define who they are. So when I first found out that I was adopted and I found out I was a foster kid, it was like, oh my God, I was traumatized. And at the time, I had stopped drinking in 1990 because I had acute pancreatitis. The doctor said, you got two choices, son. You could drink and die or not drink and live. So I was doing okay with that. I still had all of these mental health issues, but I didn't have enough. I was DMC, but I didn't know what to do. But then when I found out that when I was adopted, that's why education and information is so important. I'm DMC, the mighty king of rock, who walked this way in his Adidas to tell the world how tricky life can be. When I found out that I was adopted, all of those things came back to the surface. And when I went to therapy, I was diagnosed with suppressed emotions. I was suppressing all of this stuff that I shouldn't have been ashamed about. But what I was going to say was, when I found out that I was adopted, I didn't know what to do, so I turned to the thing that I shouldn't have been doing. But everybody has a magical power. Everybody has a magical power. And the brand puts you on the stage, on the top floor to utilize that. Like you said, it's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. But when you achieve what you set out to do, that proves that there's a magical force. Or like you said, I look at it like this: God, Yahweh, Buddha. I think God is my grandmother, but I'll find out when I get to heaven. Or the force, like you said, Homer the Iliad, Marvel Comics, Stan Lee, he used the X-Men to deal with racism and stuff like that. So the stories, that Marvel comic brand isn't just an entertainment brand. If you go back and see the purpose, Stan Lee created these characters to deal with the issues that we go through as human beings. So your brand is literally a force, a power, a blessing, something given to you. Okay, now, our whole thing with hip-hop is, okay, you sold all those records, you got all of those awards, and you got all that money from this hip-hop culture, but what are you doing with it? The reason why there's a lack of change in our communities among the young people, and all they have to do, all they have to turn to is social media, is because all of these new successful rappers in the last 20 years are forsaking their responsibility. When you get on that mic, you got a responsibility. You can tell your story about being a drug dealer, but your very next record that you got to force your record company put dollars behind to pay the radio to play should be the record about you not being a drug dealer. You can tell a story about shooting a gun. Your very next hit record, your very next product should be dollars behind the story not using a gun. When we didn't have those marketing dollars behind us, we coming out, in my generation, the most powerful thing was disco. Y'all remember disco, right? Now remember, I woke up one day and the world was saying disco sucks. And it didn't suck until everybody admitted that. We got all of this hip hop that really sucks, but nobody's talking about it because, like you said, it's a self-esteem issue. These kids think they're not cool, worthy, or they ain't perfect just the way they are if they don't participate with the nonsense. But the early rappers came out talking stories about their mothers and their fathers. I gotta tell kids, here's Brandon. Kids thought Tupac was cool and worshipped in culture, in hip-hop culture, because he had Thug Life on his chest. Thug Life tattooed his chest and he went to jail. I go into high schools, middle schools, and now elementary schools and said, no, that's not why we worship Tupac. We worship Tupac for two reasons. Dear Mama and Brenda Had a Baby. When Pac wrote that record about his mother, nobody at the label told him to do that. That was in him to release. And when he did Brenda Had a Baby, he was a young guy saying, I can do something to address teenage pregnancy. So now with your brand, what are you utilizing? What are you doing? Get the money. Don't get it wrong. Get the money. But now that you're in a process that you got it and you still getting it, what can you do? You do everything that you can do with a passion, meaning you'll die for this, with the brands that surround you. So Run DMC, we didn't just change hip hop. We changed rock, we changed music, we changed commercial, we changed marketing. So think about that one little effort of addressing one part. Black people and white people should be together. Let's do a video and let's do Aerosmith record over. Not only that, let's do it with them. See, what I'm trying to say is, as from a branding standpoint, me and Run DMC was a big up-and-coming brand. But even in the midst of our power, the world was saying, okay, Run DMC, first to go gold, first to go platinum, first on the cover of Rolling Stone. Look at all of that we accomplished. And that wasn't even the main goal. But then it was like this: where you going to be in 5 years, this and that? Hip-hop's a fad. And we was like, oh, you think we're a fad? So we went back to the vinyl record case, grabbed the record that we used to steal to use, and we did the record. From a branding standpoint, Walk This Way would have been this to y'all. Oh, remember Run DMC did that record by Aerosmith? And Aerosmith was gone? Remember, Aerosmith was over. But the fact that Rick Rubin was smart enough to say, no, let's do it with them. That was the game changer. So we're trying to fix hunger. We're trying to fix foster care and adoption and crime and illiteracy. Think about what happens when we collaborate on the common issue. It touches everything else.
And just real, can I
Yeah,
put
please.
just one additional comment too? So yeah, just beautifully said, Darryl. And I would be remiss if there's one person here who is a guy named Dr. Ron Zamber, who is the chairman of a group called Visionary Private Equity Group. It's kind of my day job now. It's impact private equity. So how do you invest $1 into something and then have triple bottom line, et cetera? And as we're looking at this from a brand standpoint, like how do I drive profitable growth in order to have impact? And just one simple example, it drives on the innovation side. We invested in a company called HomePlate, and HomePlate partners with one of the largest food buying companies called Cisco. And they took the buying power of $9 billion of buying power, and you looked at 20,000 community-based organizations. We said, is there any way we can kind of Costcoize it, like bulk buy it? Because right now they're overpaying 30, 40% to do that. And if we can just centralize the buy and have the nonprofit opt into that, all of a sudden we're able to drive 20, 30% more meals to people who don't have them. So even as it relates to, there's the story side, there's the economic side, there's the investment side. So for me, I look at all of these things, they're just useful tools to some degree. Am I really enamored with business? Not really, but it's a means to an end, right? And if I don't think about the business side or the profitable growth side, I can't do the other side. And I have to do the other side. So I always have to look at what are the profitable growth strategies for things so that I can support Grow Well or Big Brothers, Big Sisters, et cetera. So I think that part for me too, I wanted to at least put that out there as well. And he was an eye surgeon that traveled the world for 20 years curing blindness that ended up as a private equity guy who go figure. So.
He's still around?
He's still around.
We should go to him and we should create Darryl Mack cuisines, and all the profits, we get the pasta guy, the meat guy, the cookie guy, the cake guy, and we donate all the profits to charities.
Done and done.
Like
done
Paul
and done.
Newman does, DMC, because when they see that brand, they're gonna be, this is something that has integrity. And then we can serve everything.
I love
but
it.
but I'm just trying to say, yo, this is what it was about. It's about conversation, communication, collaboration, participation. Then we have transformation, and everybody has elevation.
Well said. We'll ask a couple questions or leave it open for a few questions. Yes.
So, thanks. This is amazing. One thing I want to add, I know Brand Innovators also has HR Innovators, and there's another budget we have to talk about here, and that's the HR budget that could also put a lot of impact out there. There's a lot of kids and their parents sleeping in their cars, and then the kid goes to school that we don't know about. There used to be a lot of intramural sports and more connection between the parents, teachers, and kids as to knowing their situation and helping them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and then the mental health is getting impacted of those kids because they go to school and they might not have the right clothes, or they're dirty when they go to school, so they feel less also. So there's a big opportunity to impact mental health, food security, right there that companies can get involved. Companies can get involved in having gardens at all the schools and how to grow food, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to get your guys' opinion on how companies have it right in their grasp. Their employees, who knows what's happening with the mental health of their kids, and address it and have the conversation about that situation.
Well, I was going to say, Mark is absolutely one of the leaders in this particular space. Like I'd say 4 decades, but sometimes I went up to like 8 decades one time and it annoyed him. But yeah, that combination we talked a lot about it earlier about how you bring in employees. Employees come in and want to work for companies of purpose, and when you have a company of purpose, it's just a full cycle in. People want to buy from a company and want to work with a company of purpose. So yeah, I think it's a great point, Mark. And there's a whole ecosystem of chief HR officers, chief financial officers, chief marketing officers. They all fit into the same kind of dynamic. They all have the same P&L, and their employees all roll into the same kind of purpose. So I think it's a great question.
I will just add, having been a former second in command of the Home Depot HR department, HR doesn't have as much money as marketing. And marketers can move the world because they have lots of money to spend.
And I just want to add two things that I've done by telling my story. A couple of years ago, I put a book out called 10 Ways Not to Commit Suicide, because you don't have to do it. So I was invited to go up to American Express and speak. And I just went in there and told my story. It was like 600 employees, and I just went in there. You know, I started for all of my Adidas, all the Run DMC stuff, and then I took it all the way up to 93 when I first got the press. You could feel the room change. Now they're really interested. Then it was time for Q&A. It was none of that, oh, do you know Bob Dylan? Do you know Britney Spears? It was all mental health questions. So now they're opening up. So then I signed books and took pictures. Now, the very next day, those employees, 300 of them went to the health facility, the mental health, because they have a hospital and all of that right in the building. Nobody was messing with it. So one of the things the brand has the power to do is remove guilt and shame from these situations. So that means I'm going to work at American Express every day, and I'm sitting next to you, and my life is hell, and maybe your life wasn't hell, but your daughter's going through something. And you ain't going to tell me because you're ashamed how I'm going to think about you having a daughter like that. And I ain't going to tell you because I'm worried about how you're going to look at me. I noticed that when I started telling my story, I'm adopted, I'm a foster kid, I'm an alcoholic, I went to rehab. 99% of the time, two things happen. And because my brand is so powerful, I got this positive result. I'll tell people about being adopted, being a foster kid, being an alcoholic, being suicidal.
The vulnerability.
Well,
Yes.
Ariel
piece
and I,
that-
so
Yep.
Ariel, who's with Brand Innovators, was just, I asked her, what's your story? And she
Yep.
was saying, being vulnerable.
Yeah.
If everyone's vulnerable and if everyone's willing to tell their story, then other people will be
Right.
willing to tell their
We're
story.
And
all human. It
Yeah,
is-
what I was going to say is I tell them that, and they do this, so they go. They check for bugs to make sure nobody's around, and they look and they'll whisper it to me. D, I've never told anybody this.
Exactly. My
Me
mother used
too,
to say,
those
my
words.
mother used to say, when you drive down a street and you look at all the homes, behind every door, there's a drama going on. That's a story, okay? And when we allow our stories to be told and share our vulnerabilities, no matter how successful we may be, they say, wow, you too? And I can be that?
Yep, 100%.
So, yeah.
And the leaders of the companies have to allow that.
Yes.
Yep.
How do you have the courage to be you? How do you get that courage to express yourself?
For me, this is true story. It's because of comic books. And everybody's so busy. And I tell the kids, this is, whoa, we never thought about it. Everybody's so busy looking at the physical strength of these superheroes and the superpowers, but all of the superheroes have been through traumatic events. Peter Parker, I wasn't shouting out Queens to rep my hood like a hip hop thing. The reason why I shouted out Queens is I found somebody in those pages, not in this world I lived in, I could relate. Peter Parker, he's Spider-Man, but he's awkward, he's clumsy. He was raised by Aunt May, had a family situation. So for me, I found the superhero. Batman is trying, he saw his mother and father get murdered in front of him, but it gave him a purpose. And even if he kicks ass, he's not going to murder anybody. So I found a lot of stuff that helped, not the Bible, none against the Bible. My religious and my faith comes from seeing what these superheroes go through. That's why I say all of us have a superpower. And like Stanley said, not for any reward and not for one reason, the brand's got to stand together just because it's the right thing to do, like Captain America says, no matter what. Superheroes.
Well, I'll start. I don't think it's ever, for me, it wasn't intentional, but it happened. And when I saw people respond to it, when I saw other people then begin to share their story, then that was like fuel for my soul. So it was a learned kind of behavior.
In 2008, some folks in here are too young to remember this, there was a big market crash, and there was something called the Great Recession. And my business had already been in business for a while, and we were serving the food service world all over the country. That means restaurants and hotels and country clubs and casinos. And in a minute, everyone stopped going to restaurants. And I thought food was recession resistant. And I was wrong about food service food. And my business in the first quarter was down 30%, and that trajectory looked like it was going away. It was like COVID time. It happened again, except I had a little protection there. I'll talk about that later. But the food business was really going downhill, and my business was going out. And it was for the first time in my life that I had anxiety, and high anxiety, and it gave me empathy for people who struggle with it every day. I went into deep depression. And I was walking into a supermarket because we had a little retail package business, and the owner of one of the supermarkets said to me, "How's business?" I said it was horrible. And then I said, "How is it for you?" And he says, "It's fantastic. I can't keep my high-end steaks from flying off the shelf because people weren't going to restaurants, but they were buying consumer packaged goods." And I quickly turned and restructured my business and went all in on consumer packaged goods, and Costco brought us on and completely changed what I'm all about and what the company's all about. We're 100% Nuovo Pasta is the second largest refrigerated pasta company in the United States. And when I speak and I tell that story and I share my vulnerability of where I was and how low the company was and was about to go out of business, people find strength that in their life they can do the same thing too. So.
Over time, I would just say for me, since the early 90s, it's the place I feel most whole is in places like this. So what I work on every day, the money's not a super motivator for me. It's a necessity in order to obviously make a living, but it's not what motivates me. What motivates me is these kinds of things and these kinds of partnerships. And I think I just feel most whole in myself when I'm amplifying other amazing people. And that there's no friction in that for me. It's just an easy role, so.
All right, well, thank you guys. That was incredibly thoughtful and inspiring, and hopefully everybody could use some of their power in media or publishing to make a difference.
Thank you.